Hey everybody, it's Dr. Matt Munger, and I am here with another episode of The Bible Was Written Backwards. Today it is Christmas Day here in Norway, and that has me thinking about the story of the birth of Jesus, which is obviously told a couple of times in the New Testament, in the book of Luke and the book of Matthew. But today I thought it would be fun to look at another one of the stories that is a retelling, so a reworking or reimagining of the birth that comes from a different text, namely the Syriac book of the Cave of Treasures. Now, this isn't actually much of a birth narrative because the birth of Jesus only plays a secondary role in this text, which is a retelling of all of history from creation up until the time of Christ. The Cave of Treasures does something really interesting, which is putting the focus on the Magi and their story and their travels as the framing for the birth. Now, this is a pretty long text that we're going to read, so I want to look at this text first. So, the story of the Magi in Cave of Treasures. And then what we're going to do is pick apart some of the details in it and see where these traditions come from. So, let's start by looking at the text itself. Look now, lover of doctrine, our brother Namasaya. In the 42nd year of Augustus's reign, Christ was born in Bethlehem in Judah, as it is written in the Holy Gospel. 2 years before Christ was born, a star was seen by the Magi. They saw a star in the heavenly firmament, which shone with a brighter light than all the other stars, and a girl within it holding a child, while a crown was being put upon her head. According to their custom, the kings of old and Chaldean Magi studied all the movements of the constellations. When they saw the star, they were agitated, frightened, and fearful, and the whole country of Persia was troubled. The kings, Magi, and wise men of Persia were stupefied. They were greatly terrified by the sign which they had seen and said, "Maybe the king of the Greeks decided to make war against Nimrod's country." Therefore the Magi and Chaldeans hurried and recited from the books of their wisdom, and by the wisdom of their books they understood, learned, and made their stand upon the power of truth. Now this thing was truthfully found out by the Chaldean Magi, who were able by the course of those stars, which they call signs of the zodiac, to know the foreboding of things before they happen. This knowledge is also given to those who navigate on the sea. Even before there is an uproar of wind or a storm awakens against them, the course of the stars reveals to them what kind of danger is rising against them. Thus also those Magi, when they recited from the revelations of Nimrod, found within them that a king was going to be born in Judah, and Christ's whole life was revealed to them. They left the east at once according to the tradition which they had received from their ancestors, went up to the mountains of Nod, which are on this side of the entranceways to the east at their northern foothills, and took from there gold, myrrh, and incense. May you understand from this, my brother Namosiah, that they knew the whole ministry of our Saviour's life by those 3 offerings which they brought: gold for the king, myrrh for the physician, and incense for the priest. They perceived and knew that he was king, physician, and priest. For when the king of Saba was a little boy, his father took him to a rabbi who taught him the Hebrew books, more than to his comrades and his own sons with him. Then the king told his servants, "It is written in all the books of genealogies, too, that a king will be born in Bethlehem." These are the ones who brought gifts to the king. They are kings and sons of kings. Hormazdad of Makazdi, the king of Persia, who is called King of Kings and dwells in Lower Azerbaijan, Yazdgerd, king of Saba, and Parwezdad, king of Sheba in the east. When the Magi were going up, there was great turmoil in Judah on account of an edict of Emperor Augustus, which commanded that everybody had to be registered in the place and city of his ancestors. Herod was very frightened because of this and told the Magi, "You should go and inquire about him, for I am a friend of Caesar." They are called Magi on account of the Magi's regalia worn by the pagan kings. For when they are sacrificing and make offerings to their gods, they wear two vestments, on the inside the royal one, and the one of the Magi on the outside. Likewise also those who were going up to Christ had donned two vestments in order to bring their offerings. When they left Jerusalem and Herod, the star which guided them on the way appeared to them, so that they were exceedingly glad. The star went ahead of them until it entered into a cave, and they saw the child wrapped in swaddling clothes and lying in a manger. So there's a couple of things in this text that I think will be interesting to look at a little more closely. The first of all is the fact that it's the Magi that play this central role. So there's a couple of things that are really interesting here. What we see is that the Magi have actually been foreshadowed throughout the entire book. When we look at the beginning of Cave of Treasures and we see that Adam and Eve are preparing to make their first children, we see that Adam goes to a cave, which is this Cave of Treasures that the book is named after, and he takes in with him gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And these three things are, in a way, symbols of what will come. So we have a line connecting all the way from Adam up through Jesus already at the very beginning, but by way of the wise men, of the Magi. Now, the Magi are also foreshadowed in another way, which is really interesting. And this we see in the text that we just read, where the Magi seem to be using some type of astrology or some kind of reading of ancient books that are connected to Nimrod. Now, the reason Cave of Treasures does this is that they are trying to make the knowledge that the Magi have about the star that leads them to coming to Jesus as being some kind of good knowledge. And this is done much, much earlier in Cave of Treasures when a figure by the name of Nimrod is introduced, who is also found in Genesis, but who plays a different role here. Now, Nimrod goes off to the east where he meets the fourth son of Noah, whose name is Yantan. So here's that text from Cave of Treasures. Nimrod went to Yuktura in the country of Nod. When he reached the sea, Otros, he found Yantan, the son of Noah, there. He went down and bathed in that sea. Then he drew near and worshipped Yantan. Yantan said to him, "You are a king and worship me?" Nimrod told him, "It is because of you that I came down here." He stayed with him for 3 years, and Yantan taught Nimrod wisdom and the Book of Oracles. Then he told him, "Do not come back to me again." After we have seen this connection, we see that Nimrod plays a central role in maintaining knowledge that is from before the flood, or is good knowledge that is kept secret from basically everyone else up until the time of the Magi. This makes sure that the Magi are able to come and worship God or worship Jesus in a way that is ordained or accepted by God. Now, there's another thing that's interesting here that we have to look at, and that comes at the very end of the text. And that's the fact that Mary and Joseph are in a cave. Now, this is a fairly common ancient idea that Mary and Joseph didn't make it to an inn or to the town of Bethlehem to give birth, but that Jesus was actually born in a cave. Now, the oldest text that we have that maintains this tradition is the infancy gospel of James, or the proto-evangelium of James, which maintains this precise tradition. This is another long text, but I want to look at the whole section that tells about the birth of Jesus, well, because it's Christmas, but also because this provides some interesting details about where people thought Jesus was actually born.
Now an order came out from King Augustus that everyone in Bethlehem of Judea be registered for a census. And Joseph said, "I will register my sons, but what shall I do with this child? How shall I register her? As my wife? I'm too ashamed to do that. As my daughter? The children of Israel know that she is not my daughter. On this day of the Lord, he will do as he wishes." And he saddled his donkey and sat her on it, and his son led it, while Samuel followed behind. As they approached the 3rd mile, Joseph turned around and saw that she was sad. And he said to himself, Maybe the child in her is causing her uneasiness. Then Joseph turned around again and saw her laughing and said to her, Mary, why is it that I see your face laughing one moment, but then sad another moment? And she replied, Joseph, because my eyes see two peoples, one lamenting and mourning, and the other one cheerful and rejoicing. And when they came to the halfway point, Mary said to him, Joseph, take me down from the donkey because the child inside me is pressing his weight on me to come forth. And he took her down from there and said to her, Where can I take you to hide your shameful nakedness, because this place is wilderness? He found a cave there and took her inside it. And he positioned his sons to guard her and went out to search for a Hebrew midwife in the area around Bethlehem. And I saw a woman coming down from the hill country, and she said to me, Man, where are you going? I replied, I am searching for a Hebrew midwife. And she asked me, Are you from Israel? And I said to her, Yes. And she asked, Then who is the one who has given birth in a cave? And I replied, My betrothed. And she said to me, Is she not your wife? And I replied to her, She is Mary, the one who was brought up in the temple of the Lord. And I received her by lot as my wife. But she is not my wife. However, she has conceived by the Holy Spirit. And the midwife said, Is this true? And Joseph said to her, Come and see. And the midwife went with him. And they stood in front of the cave. And a dark cloud overshadowed the cave. And the midwife said, My soul has been magnified today, because my eyes have seen an incredible sign. For salvation has been born to Israel. And immediately the cloud contracted from the cave, and a great light appeared within the cave so that their eyes could not bear it. A little time afterwards that light began to contract until an infant could be seen. And he came and took the breast of his mother, Mary. And the midwife cried out and said, How great is this day for me, for I have seen this wondrous sight.
Now, part of what's interesting here is the beginning where we see that Joseph is trying to figure out how he should register Mary. We see that Joseph has other sons, which is one of these early traditions that the brothers of Jesus were Joseph's sons from a previous marriage, and that Mary was just a child with someone that Joseph is taking care of. Now, the more interesting thing for me is just the fact that we're talking about a cave. So as they're making their way to Bethlehem from Nazareth, they need to find a place to give birth. There's a cave, and Joseph takes her in and then goes looking for a midwife. And then this midwife doesn't really seem to do any helping with the birth, but again, enters the cave, and there's a shadow, a dark cloud, and then a gleam of light, and poof, Jesus is born. So both of these texts we looked at, the Syriac Cave of Treasures, which kind of frames the birth in this long narrative with the wise men appearing 2 years before, preparing for the birth, and then arriving just in time. And then this other story where Joseph has found a cave in the wilderness and Mary is born there. They show us the ways that we have different traditions and also some developing traditions about the birth of Jesus in the time after the writing of the canonical Gospels. So when it comes to the proto-evangelium of James, the infancy Gospel of James, it's hard to say whether or not these traditions were circulating at the same time as the other Gospels were written down. So was Jesus actually born in a cave or in Bethlehem or in Nazareth? I don't really think we know. But what we do see is that there's a need to make Mary much holier in these texts. So she's given a very special position where she also has a miraculous birth. She's taken care of, and she is then sin-free when she gives birth to Jesus. So this elevation of Mary is part of the rewriting, the recasting of characters in the post-biblical period. And again, Cave of Treasures does a similar thing by raising up the wise men and giving them a good good, reasonable excuse for having the knowledge that they have and helping us make sense of why they are good characters throughout the entire story. So again, this is another way in which the Bible is being written backwards, now in the way people are imagining the birth of Jesus in the time after the New Testament was written.